Spring game in the books, and Oregon's Dillon Gabriel, well, he showed why he can win Oregon a Big Ten title. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, so do Oregon's football players, of course, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Lots to get to. We'll talk plenty of Dillon Gabriel, a couple of transfer departures on today's show, but let's start with Oregon's quarterback, who frankly might not even have been the most talked about or the most eye-popping quarterback in this game. I don't think Gabriel was really at the top of his game necessarily. I thought he was good. I thought he was solid. I mean, his stat line, 14 for 21, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. His team won. It's solid. It's solid. And of course, you're not running the quarterback here, which is a feature of Dillon Gabriel's game that we didn't see. But I think that he showed that he's got enough. That he's got the ability to lead the Oregon offense in a way that is both efficient with shorter passes, but also explosive, and he's willing to take shots down the field, and he can fit it into some tight windows. And he really didn't get off to a good start in the game. I think if you watch the first series, or really just the first couple of series that Gabriel led on the field for the Oregon offense, it was not very impressive. But then he settled in and he started to complete a couple of passes, and I thought he was solid. I thought he was really, really solid, and that's kind of what I've expected to see from him, and that's what I think we saw from him on Saturday. He's a guy who can make some throws and execute the offense and just be a really above average quarterback. And he doesn't always have to dazzle, but it doesn't always need to be dazzling. And I thought, I thought his best throw, frankly, was not counted. I don't think it was counted. The sideline throw to Evan Stewart, where Stewart made, the one-handed grab. He kind of pinned it against his shoulder, and, there was pass interference on the play. I think it was Cam Alexander who was the guilty party there. But I thought that was probably Gabriel's best throw of the day, and it didn't end up counting, but he had a lot of other really solid ones, and you see a guy that, can hit the short throws, can hit their intermediate throws, and will take shots down the field as well. I also thought he had a great throw to Kyler Casper, and that was a touchdown. If you just look at the I know it's a spring game, you're not going to do a slow-mo replay, but I think Kyler Casper kind of dragged his back foot just before his front foot hit out of bounds. But I thought that was a really nice throw. Casper had his man beat, but the ball was put in a really, really nice place. But the other thing that stood out to me about Dillon Gabriel is something that I have theorized on the show previously, and I think kind of came to fruition, at least in the spring game. Tez Johnson is going to be his favorite target. So, first play of the game was the bubble screen, and they get it to Tez Johnson on the perimeter. Like that's not indicative of anything. But if you look at what really got Gabriel going after a little bit of a sluggish start where, he was off the mark on a couple of deep balls down the field, Tez Johnson was the guy that really got him going. And I thought that their rhythm and timing on the plays where they hooked up was just excellent. And Tez Johnson led Oregon in receptions last year, total number of receptions. I think that he is going to lead Oregon in total receptions again this year. And, Johnson plays the same spot that Drake Stoops did last year, who was the leading receiver for the Sooners. Didn't quite hit 1,000 yards, but still, I think Johnson has got a much more explosive element to his game, and Gabriel's going to like that. And look, Tez Johnson's just a really good player. Now, we didn't see a lot of Trayshawn Holden in this game. He got dinged up a little early on. There were a couple injuries. I don't think anything so severe that someone isn't going to be able to play this season. We don't know on Jurion Dickey. Speaking of wide receivers, he got banged up in this game and unfortunately had to go out, which would just be a bummer and a half if it was bad, because he basically didn't have a chance to play last year because of an injury that he suffered in high school. So But going back to Tez Johnson, that guy is every bit as good as we remember him. We last saw him play, of course, in January, and I think that he and Gabriel are going to have a similar sort of connection. It won't be a brotherly connection, but it'll still be a good connection between Gabriel and Tez Johnson this year. I think it's going to look, I think his numbers could look close to identical to what he put up a year ago, because that just, I think, fits into what Dillon Gabriel is comfortable and familiar with, and what he's capable of doing, and that's delivering the ball into some tight windows. I said that Gabriel's throw, or his best throw, might have been that sideline toss to Evan Stewart, which it might have been, but a close second would be the first touchdown that he threw, which was to Justice Lowe, who's had a nice couple of spring games during his career at Oregon. He hasn't cracked the rotation. Tez Johnson kind of talked him up. I don't know if there's a lot to that, but I thought that the slant RPO for the touchdown is why Dillon Gabriel can fit this offense, and it's the pinpoint passing in the RPO game. And Justice Lowe had Tysheem Johnson on him, beat him to the inside. It was an RPO concept, so Gabriel read that the linebackers came up. There was a little void behind, and he zipped the ball right past Jeffrey Boss's arm, inside Tysheem Johnson, and onto the hands of Justice Lowe. That is what I think makes Dillon Gabriel a really, really good orchestrator for this offense. And with all the weapons at his disposal, like I said off the top, he can win Oregon a Big Ten championship. That is 100% something that I believe. And do I expect him to be a Heisman finalist? No. Does he need to be? Also no. Is he capable of doing that? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But another big takeaway from the spring game, of which I had several. Drop all your questions in the comments. Mailbag has started to fill up a little bit, but certainly drop your comments or drop your questions in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, or join the flock over at Subtext for priority access and all sorts of other perks. The other thing that stood out in this spring game, watching particularly the first half, boy, the defensive line looked good. I mean, the running lanes were few and far between, and everything was hard. Quarterbacks were under pressure. They were moved off their spots, had to start getting the ball out really quickly because the pressure was there. Oregon's got a lot of bodies, and one of the big questions throughout spring football has been, well, how are the redshirt freshmen going to look? Guys like Amari Washington or Terrence Green, Michael Gardner, all those sorts of players that we really haven't seen get a real chance to play. I thought a lot of them were impressive. And I mean, just holistically looking at the unit, Jamari Caldwell's a beast. The Houston transfer, oh man, that dude is really, really explosive on the interior. But he's not the only guy that made plays along the defensive front. And I think as you go into the Big Ten, that's a really, really important aspect for Oregon's defense, is you have to be strong in the trenches, because really what you want to do against a lot of Big Ten teams is not let them run the ball. And Oregon, that has a good offensive line. Now, it was pretty split up, and I remember looking at the offensive line rosters, and when the green and white were announced, and thinking, don't know how much either team is going to have success-wise up front on the offensive side of the ball, because you certainly had your starters pretty well dispersed. But still, I thought they were I thought the defensive line controlled basically the entire first quarter. That's what it looked like. So I thought that was really encouraging. And if you can shut down other teams' run games in the Big Ten, force them to throw the ball, this is not a great quarterback conference that Oregon is going into, at least this year. And I think that plays very much into what you want to do, because Oregon, with Gabriel and all the weapons, they're going to be able to throw the football. They're going to be able to move the ball up and down the field. So those were just a couple of the takeaways. But fascinating question came in about Dillon Gabriel, and I liked what I saw from him. Wasn't perfect. Could he set even more records than Bo Nix? We'll talk about that next. First, we're talking about Monopoly Go. Because, all right, game off. We got to pause here, talk more about Monopoly Go, because we can't talk about it too much. And I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in the game, guys. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, hilarious amotes emojis that you can taunt your friends with. There's just all sorts of stuff over there. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. There's always timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. So go check it out. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Second segment sip, always on. Okay, mailbag time. Plenty of questions. Again, YouTube comments, X, subtext. Yeah, those be the ways. Okay. This one came in from the flock, that be the subtext community. Hey, Spencer, on a very quick look into all-time quarterback yardage leaders, I noticed that Dillon Gabriel only needs 4,300-ish, very specific, yards to become the leader. Seems very possible with the weapons he has. Please verify my findings and let me know what you think. Love your show. Go Ducks. Appreciate you. So, he needs 13 starts. The broadcast had this very well laid out, and I'll share my thoughts on each of these particular milestones in a moment, but to set the all-time NCAA record. This is Gabriel's 6th year as a quarterback, by the way. He's battled injuries, had the COVID year and whatnot. He needs 13 starts, 4,353 passing yards, 4,190 total yards, 31 passing touchdowns, 27 total touchdowns, and any one of those marks would set an all-time NCAA record. Currently, those marks are held by Bo Nix in career starts. Case Keenum has passing and total yards and passing and total touchdowns. Guy put up some crazy numbers when he was at Houston. Now, those numbers that Gabriel has to put up in order to set the all-time NCAA records, they're not small numbers. They're also not unattainable. Do I think, though, he'll get them? No. Could he get a couple? Yes, absolutely. So, most likely one would be starts. If Oregon makes the Big Ten championship game and Gabriel stays upright, he'll set the record with the number of starts, because that would be the 13th game of the year. And if Oregon goes 10-2 or 11-1 and is in the Big Ten title game, that one I think is the most attainable. 4,353 passing yards. Gabriel just had the best season of his career, and he was at about 3,600 passing yards. So he'd have to go past that by a lot, and I don't think he's going to get there, not because he doesn't have more weapons or a better situation than what he had at Oklahoma, which was certainly a good situation. They were a 10-2 team in the regular season last year. But I think that Oregon has a commitment to the run game and has a capability to run the football so well, and Lanning has a desire, as he should, with the way that the running backs and offensive line look. I don't think it's going to allow Gabriel the opportunity to go for that many yards. Now, you might be saying that, hey, well, Bo Nix last year went for 4,500 yards. That is true. He did, which is why this is possible for Gabriel to have that particular record. However, I don't think Dillon Gabriel is as good as Bo Nix. I don't think he's going to have the same statistical season, nor does he need to. If he's around 4,000 yards passing and, has his touchdowns in the 30s and his interceptions at 5 or fewer, that's a great year. That's a great year. It'll be the best quarterback season we've probably seen in the Big Ten. I wouldn't sleep on Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, though. That guy looks really, really good. Does he have as good a weapons as Oregon? No. He does have our old friend Dante Dowdell in the backfield, but certainly, I think Raiola is a really talented guy. I would watch for the total yards, 4,190, because, look, Gabriel, the last couple of seasons on the ground has totaled at least 300 yards rushing. I'd expect him to be in that sort of range again. I don't know that it's going to be a primary feature where Gabriel's going to churn out 100-yard rushing games like Jeremiah Masoli did back in the day. But certainly, I think him running for around 300 yards could absolutely come into play. So if he were, let's say he runs for 350, then he would only have to go past his career best mark of a year ago, around 3,600 yards to be exact, 3,660. He'd only have to go past that by a couple hundred yards. And by the way, he only played 12 games last year. So if he plays a 13th or a 14th, yeah, you can move into that sort of range. And, I think he can definitely hit 4,000 yards, but can he get to, was it 4,353? That'd be asking a lot. Like if you take what Gabriel did last year at Oklahoma and you say, well, what if he had 2 more games? He would need 700 yards passing in those 2 games. That's a lot. But when you look at his total amount of yardage last year, it was 3,660 with 373 on the ground. Little quick math, and that's putting you in the 4,000 range. So I think he could set the total yardage record, the passing yardage. Not sure. 27 total touchdowns. He could easily get that. That one. That might even You'd probably have to have the 13 starts to get the 27 total touch. Nah, I don't think you would. 12 games last year, he had 30 touchdowns through the air and 12 on the ground. I don't expect him to have 12 on the ground. I think he'll probably have in the 6 to 8 range would be my guess. But 27 total touchdowns, yeah, I think he could. I think he could definitely set that record. But those are all within reach for him, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't set at least 2. And 31 passing touchdowns, I think he could go past that. Not guaranteed that he would, but definitely possible because I expect him to play more than 12 games. So, like that question, and like what I saw from Dillon Gabriel, not Bo Nix, doesn't mean he's bad. There are a select few YouTube commenters out there who are under the impression I don't like Dillon Gabriel. This is incorrect. I like him. I just don't think he's Bo Nix, because Bo Nix, he's very good. Bo Nix was really, really good. Speaking of which, Bo Nix was one of 8 Oregon players drafted last weekend, and that's an Oregon record. Could they break that record one day? Conversation for another show. But this is a conversation for right here and now. This question came from Dawson. 2 questions. Do you think Franklin not being drafted in the 2nd reflects poorly on Oregon? He ended up going in the 4th. And what brought on the intro music change for Locked On Ducks? The everydayers want to know. So the music change is just a stylistic change that was decided at the network that, we were going to kind of shift the tone to reflect the audience that we've got. And I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on it. I really like it personally. And that's all it is. You see shows and podcasts change that sort of stuff all the time. So that's all that was. And I really like the new intro, and a lot of you clearly do as well. I've gotten several comments on it. But on the Troy Franklin front, no, I don't think it reflects poorly on Oregon. I think Oregon got a really, really good PR boost coming out of the NFL draft with, 8 guys getting drafted, including the craziest run on Ducks in a single round, I think, ever. I don't know if we've ever seen 5 guys. Shout out to Jamal Hill, by the way, who was the 8th Duck drafted. I cannot say I had that on my bingo card, but props to Jamal Hill. He had a good year last year with the Ducks. But I think that 4th round is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. You had Franklin go early. Then Kyrie Jackson came off the board. Then Dorlus came off the board. Evan Williams came off the board, and Bucky Irving came off the board. That's one out of every about 6 players drafted in the 4th round of the 2024 NFL draft went to the University of Oregon. And yeah, Troy Franklin was underdrafted here. Absolutely. I don't know what the NFL knows. The NFL's got a lot of really high standards, and they can sour on you for any particular reason, and no one, I don't know what it is. I have not heard what it is. I know there was a video going around of, a drill that he had that didn't exactly look sharp, where you run straight across the field and you catch balls from either side. He was weaving in and out, and he caught one in his body. And I think that's the biggest knock on Franklin coming out of college. He is not a very handsy receiver. He catches the ball with his body a good amount. He's also not known as the most physical guy. But does that make him wide receiver 17? No, not a chance. Not a chance. I think him being in Denver with Bo Nix could be fantastically awesome. And look, if anything, Franklin getting passed on several times, that sort of thing can put a chip on a guy's shoulder. And I hope Franklin goes and balls out in his rookie year, and I hope Bo Nix is throwing him the ball. Be a glorious thing to watch. If Franklin goes out and just has, a 500-600 yard season and catches a few touchdowns, that'd be a fantastic rookie year. And I hope Bo Nix is the guy throwing him the football. I think he will be. There are other quarterbacks in the room. Bo was also taken 12th overall. You'd think they'd bring in a guy like that to come in and start. But yeah, very, very interesting NFL draft. I did not think Franklin would move out of the second round. He was at one point in time mocked going in the first to the Chiefs or the Bills. And he fell to the fourth. There were 16 receivers taken ahead of him. There were not 16 receivers better than him in this draft. Maybe 5 or 6, but not 16. Not even close. So I think that'll be fascinating to follow, to say the least. Oregon's had a couple of transfer portal departures. Will they be the last ones post-spring game? To find out, you'll have to go over to FanDuel first. Why? Because I said so. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 whether your team wins or loses. You can bet anything you want for Oregon. Win total, Big Ten, national championship odds. It's all there. Even some individual games. Oregon -1.5 against Ohio State, perhaps most notably. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So, what are you waiting for? I don't know either. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, make your first bet, and automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60%. 60%, that's over half. Buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., whatever you want. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, a couple of transfer portal departures for Oregon that were announced, I think, just prior to the spring game. Johnny Bowens along the defensive line and Kodi DeCambra, because pronunciation is important, in the secondary at the safety position. So let me start with Bowens and the takeaway here. He was one of those 4-star defensive line recruits in the class of 2023, and I think he just wasn't able to find playing time or see a path to playing time this year. And what I talked about earlier in the show is I think a reason why. There are good players along that defensive line, guys that don't have necessarily the most reps in live game action. I mean, Keon Ware-Hudson and Ben Roberts, they've seen more of the field. I thought Roberts had a nice spring game, by the way. But there are a lot of inexperienced guys that are vying for playing time. I've talked about that on the show a lot over the last couple of months. And if Bowens is transferring out, I think that means that he's just fallen down the depth chart. And I don't think this is a major loss for the Ducks. I think this was, at some level, a little bit inevitable. Coming into the spring game, a couple people sent me questions wondering, like, hey, who do you think could transfer out? Where could you see departures? And defensive line was one of those spots, right? And you see such a high volume of defensive and offensive linemen in a given high school recruiting cycle, or portal cycle for that matter, that names can pile up pretty quickly and guys can just get, shuffled down to the bottom. But, Bowens is a guy that has got plenty of potential. He's not a 4-star recruit by accident. He's a really, really big physical guy as well. But everybody else has just seemingly passed him on the depth chart. And I think that's all that this is. I don't think there's really anything else to take away from it other than, the defensive line looked good. And I think that's a great sign for the Ducks. Like, if someone who is this talented that could probably go and find at least a role at a Power 4 school or a high-level group of 5 somewhere, if a guy like that who has all the physical traits to succeed is saying, I can't play this year in this defensive line group, or the coaching staff has told him, and this is speculation on my part or hypothetical, whatever, if the coaching staff has told him, hey, you're not going to play a ton this year, that's where the defensive line is at, and that's just what it looked like. I mean, that unit was really controlling the first the first several minutes of the game, really most of the first half. So Bowens is the first guy out, and Kodi DeCambra is the other guy. Now, this comes a little bit more of a surprise to me because Oregon's safety depth is pretty thin, and Kobe Savage, the Kansas State transfer, he got dinged up. Jordan James just popped him on the sideline. There's nothing dirty or malicious about it. He just popped him, and he was flying in there, and he got hit, and boom. Jordan James can deliver a blow, and I'll talk about him, I think, a little bit more on tomorrow's show, Jordan James, that is. But, the safety depth has not been exceptionally great, at least on paper this spring. And when you lose a guy like Savage, it kind of, brings to fruition, or it makes it feel real of like, okay, if you lose one of these transfer guys who you feel like are starting caliber players, where are you turning to? Who are you going to? Well, Aaron Flowers could be one of those guys because he was everywhere in that spring game. I was thoroughly impressed with Aaron Flowers' performance, and that, I think, could have been what drove DeCambra out. He was a 4-star recruit. DeCambra was in the 2023 class, so redshirt freshman coming in. But as spring football has, now come to a close with graduation and the spring game having come and gone, DeCambra might have seen Flowers come in and just push him down the depth chart or leapfrog him on the depth chart, because I think Flowers was really impressive. Now, we also didn't see every Oregon defensive back, like Brandon Johnson, for instance, who is not technically a safety. He's coming in to play that nickel spot, which is sometimes a corner, sometimes a safety, sometimes a guy who's there to just play nickel. Kind of depends on, the personnel package that Tosh Lupoy and Chris Hampton and Dan Lanning want on the field at a given time. But I think that for DeCambra to go out was really an endorsement of what we saw from Aaron Flowers. So those are the two guys that have left so far. And I don't think either one is majorly surprising. But again, DeCambra a little bit more just because there isn't a lot of depth, and there's a much clearer and less obstructed path to playing time at that position than, say, the defensive line. Now, are these the last guys that are going to transfer out? I'd be surprised if they were. I'd be really surprised if they were. I don't think you're going to have any major names, but depth pieces or recruiting guys, or recruits that, maybe like Ashton Cozart last year transferred after one season. I think he thought he was going to play a little bit sooner than he would have, and certainly he would have had a chance to fight his way up the depth chart this year. But Oregon's receivers also look very, very good, and that can be a really tough room to crack now and in the future for anybody that wants to catch passes from whoever's throwing them the football this year or next. Because boy, there were some talented receivers. I'll definitely get to that more on tomorrow's show as well. But I'd be surprised if there are just no other transfers. Like, so far you've had Michael Wooten, the offensive lineman, and then Bowens and DeCambra. I don't think there have been any others, at least that I know of. But I believe Oregon's still a couple over the scholarship limit. Now, that has to be cut down by the time fall camp actually starts. So I don't think it's a pressing need, but the portal is open to enter, and then guys can exit the portal at any time. Actually, you can enter the portal until some time in the day on Tuesday, April 30th. So we should know pretty quickly whether there will be more names that go into the transfer portal. And I think it's just the way of college football now, that you're going to have guys that go through spring football and wait and say, okay, I don't see how I'm going to play this year, and I see a lot of talented guys coming in next year, and coach hasn't been giving me the opportunities. Like, there are all sorts of reasons why a guy would decide to leave. So that's what I would expect to see happen. A prediction, I don't know. Like, it's hard because there are so many factors in play. I think you readily could have made a prediction that Nico Reed was going to enter the transfer portal because, well, he's not necessarily a starter. He's a rotation guy in the secondary like Triquez Bridges, and the guy who brought him to Oregon, Demetrius Martin, is now the DB coach at Michigan State. But Nico Reed is stuck around. Like he's still here. And, maybe he'll be one of the guys that enters. But I think Oregon has got plenty of depth at just about every spot. I do think that the DeCambra departure makes me think about whether he knows they're going to bring in a guy like Jacoby Matthews, the Texas A&M transfer, who's been a target for the last couple of weeks. Still all quiet on the Western Front with regards to his transfer portal recruitment. Like I've asked a couple of different people in the recruiting world. No one has heard or knows anything, so he's playing it very close to the chest on that one, and we'll certainly await to see what his decision ends up being and whether it ends up being Oregon. But that one has not had any sort of noise, and Oregon has got their sights set on transfer targets, which is another reason that I'd expect another player or two to transfer out, because if you get an announcement sometime on Monday or on Tuesday that hey Oregon is going to bring in let's say Derek Harmon, for instance, from Michigan State, the defensive tackle, could you see another guy from that room go out? Yeah, maybe. Or perhaps Bowens was the precursor to that announcement. Like he knew, oh, well, I'm already at this point on the depth chart, and that's going to get a lot harder when Derek Harmon comes in. Maybe that's the way it'll shake out. But I don't think Oregon is quite done yet in the transfer portal. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.